The message arrived on a Tuesday.
It came not as radio waves or laser pulses, but as a ripple in space-time itself, a gravitational whisper that every observatory on Earth detected simultaneously. The signal translated itself, projected directly into the minds of every human being over the age of 12, speaking in their native tongues with cold, calculated precision. Species designation: human. Planet designation: Earth. Star designation: Soul. You have been observed. You have been measured. You have been found. Concerning. A delegation will arrive in 30 of your rotational cycles. Prepare to receive the judgment of the Galactic Concordance. Resistance is not recommended. The world changed in that instant.
Admiral Helena Vance stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, humanity's first permanent orbital habitat, watching the stars with different eyes than she had possessed a month ago. Behind her, the greatest minds Earth had ever produced argued in a dozen languages, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of fear, wonder, and desperate planning.
They said, concerning, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, head of the hastily assembled First Contact Committee, was saying, not hostile, not primitive, not even subject to elimination. Concerning. What does that mean?
It means they're afraid of us, Colonel James Morrison growled. He was American, built like a tank, with 3 tours and conflicts most people didn't know existed. You don't send warnings to things you don't fear.
Or they're simply following protocol, countered Ambassador Chen Wei, China's representative. Advanced civilizations might have standardized procedures for newly detected species.
Helena turned from the window. In my experience, you don't tell someone that resistance isn't recommended unless you've already calculated that resistance is possible.
The room fell silent.
30 days.
In 30 days, humanity would meet its galactic neighbors, and something in Helena's gut told her that this wouldn't be a warm welcome to the cosmic community.
The delegation arrived precisely on schedule.
12 ships emerged from folded space, each one the size of a small moon, their surfaces writhing with patterns that hurt human eyes to observe. They took up positions around Earth in a geometric arrangement that humanity's best physicists recognized with dawning horror as an energy containment lattice.
The Concordance had come prepared to cage a world.
A single shuttle descended, landing in the Sahara Desert where a temporary reception site had been constructed. Helena stood with the other delegates, 42 representatives from every nation on Earth, watching as the vessel's hatch opened with a hiss of alien atmosphere.
3 beings emerged. The first was a Kethvari, according to the data packet the Concordance had transmitted ahead of their arrival. It stood 7 feet tall, its body a lattice of crystalline structures that refracted light in impossible ways. Where its face should have been, a constellation of smaller crystals pulsed with bioluminescent thought.
The second was a Morvathi, a being of flowing mercury-like substance that constantly reshaped itself, never settling on a single form. It communicated through subsonic vibrations that resonated in human chests like distant thunder.
The third was the one that made Helena's blood run cold.
It looked human. Almost.
Its proportions were slightly off, limbs too long, joints bending at subtle wrong angles, a face that approached the uncanny valley and dove straight into its depths. It smiled with too many teeth, and when it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere.
"Greetings, humans," the near-human said. "I am Overseer Vex, appointed by the Concordance to facilitate your species' integration into the galactic community. These are Arbiter, crystalline voice of ancient stars," it gestured to the Kethvari, "and Warden flowing through darkness, the Morvathi, who will serve as your guides during this transition period."
Ambassador Chen stepped forward, having been selected as humanity's primary speaker. On behalf of Earth and all her peoples, we welcome you. We have many questions and hope this will be the beginning of a mutually beneficial relationship.
Vex's smile widened. Too wide. Oh, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This is not a negotiation, Ambassador. This is an orientation. It gestured, and the air itself seemed to shimmer as a holographic display materialized, a star map of incomprehensible scale, showing the spiral arm of the galaxy that contained Sol. The Galactic Concordance has maintained order for 900 million of your years, Vex explained. 12,000 species currently exist under our guidance. Each has been cultivated to fill a specific role in our civilization. The Kethvari, for example, serve as our archivists and historians. The Mordathi maintain our industrial infrastructure. Every species has a place. Every species knows its place. And what place do you propose for humanity? Helena asked, stepping forward despite Chen's warning glance. Vex turned those two deep eyes toward her. You, Admiral Vance. Yes, we know who you are. We know who all of you are. We've been watching your species for quite some time. It paused, and when it spoke again, its voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. Humans are problematic. Your evolution produced a species of unprecedented contradiction. You are simultaneously the most violent and the most compassionate beings we have ever observed. You create art that moves us to emotional states our species cannot name, and you wage wars that would make the most brutal predator species recoil. You advance technologically with reckless abandon, achieving in centuries what other species take millennia to accomplish. And most concerning of all, Vex leaned forward, and its false human mask seemed to slip for just a moment, revealing something vast and cold behind those artificial eyes. You don't give up. Ever. We've watched species face extinction and accept their fate with dignity. We've seen civilizations offered impossible choices and make logical decisions. But humans? You fight. You rage. You break yourselves against impossible odds simply because you refuse to accept that any situation is truly hopeless. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Helena met its gaze without flinching. I'd say it's our best quality. Vex straightened, and the mask slid back into place. The Concordance has classified humanity as a Class 7 existential risk. Left unchecked, our models predict your species will either destroy itself through internal conflict or, more concerningly, will expand beyond your ability to be contained, potentially destabilizing the current galactic order. And what exactly do you intend to do about it? Morrison asked. We intend to contain you, Vex said simply, for your own good and for the good of the galaxy. Earth will be quarantined. Your nuclear capabilities will be removed. Your space programs will be limited to orbital activities only. Certain technologies will be prohibited entirely, and your population will be managed to sustainable levels. The desert wind howled through the silence that followed. Managed? Chen finally asked. What do you mean, managed? Your current population of 8 billion is excessive. We will implement a humane reduction program targeting a stable population of 500 million. The process will be painless, a slight alteration to your reproductive systems that will naturally reduce birth rates over 3 generations. You want to sterilize our species, Helena said flatly. We want to save your species, Vex corrected. Left to your own devices, you will destroy yourselves within 2 centuries. Our intervention ensures humanity's survival, albeit in a more controlled form. You should be thanking us. Morrison laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Lady, I've heard some things in my time, but that takes the cake. You just told us you're going to lobotomize our civilization and asked for gratitude. We are offering you a choice, Vex said. Accept the Concordance's terms and be granted protection, medical technology that will end all disease, and a guaranteed future for your species, or resist and be dealt with. I should mention that in the 900 million years of concordance rule, no species has ever successfully resisted. The last to try was the Velkathi 40 million years ago. They are now extinct.
You killed them? Chen asked, horror creeping into his voice.
We didn't have to. They destroyed themselves attempting to fight us. Their own weapons turned against their own worlds in their desperation. Vex shook its head with what might have been genuine sadness. We do not wish that fate for humanity. You have such potential, if only it could be properly directed.
Helena stepped forward again, and this time she didn't stop until she was face to face with the overseer. I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say, because I'm only going to say it once.
Vex's false eyes glittered. By all means, Admiral.
Humanity has faced extinction before. Ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues that killed half our population, 2 world wars that nearly ended us, and every single time we survived. Not because we're the strongest, or the smartest, or the most adaptable. We survived because when something threatens us, we don't waste time calculating odds or accepting logical outcomes.
She leaned in closer. We get angry. And when humans get angry, when we decide that something is unacceptable, we don't rest until we've burned it to the ground. You think you've calculated our resistance probability? You think you've accounted for human unpredictability? I've got news for you, Overseer. Your models are wrong. They're always wrong when it comes to us, because you're using reason to predict a species that was forged in chaos. Vex's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in those artificial depths. We shall see, Admiral. We shall see.
The Concordance didn't wait for humanity's answer. 3 days after the initial meeting, the Kethvari ships began their work. Targeted gravitational pulses hit every nuclear facility on Earth simultaneously, causing catastrophic containment failures that were somehow, impossibly, completely contained. No radiation leaked, no explosions occurred, but every reactor, every warhead, every gram of fissile material on the planet was rendered inert.
Humanity's nuclear arsenal, its ultimate deterrent, its ace in the hole, was gone in an afternoon.
Next came the satellites. Communications networks went dark as concordance vessels systematically disabled or destroyed anything in orbit that could be used for coordination or observation. Within a week, Earth was blind and isolated.
Then came the enforcers.
Morvathi descended on every major city, their liquid bodies splitting and reforming to be everywhere at once. They didn't attack, not directly. They simply controlled. Any attempt to organize resistance was anticipated and prevented. Leaders were separated from followers. Supply lines were disrupted. Weapons stockpiles were located and neutralized with surgical precision.
And through it all, Overseer Vex appeared on screens around the world, screens that shouldn't have been working, delivering messages of reassurance. This is for your own good, it said, again and again. In time, you will understand. In time, you will thank us. Helena Vance watched from a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains as the world she knew was systematically dismantled. Around her, the remnants of 12 nations' military leadership struggled to mount any kind of response.
They're not even trying hard, Morrison observed bitterly. This is casual to them, like swatting flies.
Because it is, Helena said. A 900 million-year-old civilization with technology we can't even comprehend. Of course they're not trying. They don't have to.
Then what do we do? Dr. Tanaka asked. We can't fight them. We can't run from them. What options do we have?
Helena was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled, a small, dangerous expression that made Morrison's eyebrows rise. We do what humans have always done when faced with an overwhelming enemy, she said. We pretend to lose. We watch, we learn, and we wait.
Wait for what?
For them to make a mistake. Because they will. They always do. Every empire in history has made the same error. They underestimate the people they're trying to oppress. They think compliance means acceptance. They think silence means surrender. She turned to face them, and there was fire in her eyes. But we don't surrender. We endure. And when the moment comes, when they've grown complacent and careless, we show them exactly why they were right to be afraid of us.
10 years passed. On the surface, humanity had been tamed. The Concordance's population management protocols were implemented, not through forced sterilization, as Vex had threatened, but through more insidious means. Economic incentives discouraged large families. Social engineering promoted smaller household structures. And a subtle addition to the global water supply ensured that conception rates dropped by exactly the projected amount.
Cities were reorganized according to concordance efficiency models. Humanity's scattered nations were consolidated into 12 administrative zones, each managed by a local species that had long since accepted its role in the galactic order. The Kethvari monitored information, the Morvathi controlled industry, and a dozen other species Helena had never heard of handled everything from agriculture to entertainment.
Humans were still allowed to live, to work, to even create. But everything they did was watched. Everything they built was inspected. And anything that deviated too far from the prescribed norm was quietly corrected.
The Concordance called it integration.
Humans called it something else.
In the underground networks that spread like roots beneath the surface of apparent compliance, they called it the long silence.
Helena Vance, now 63 years old but still sharp as ever, stood in a cavern 3 miles beneath what had once been Kansas. Around her, representatives from all 12 zones had gathered for what might have been the most dangerous meeting in human history.
"Report," she said simply.
Major, formerly Colonel, Morrison stepped forward. 20 years of guerrilla organizing had turned him from a blunt instrument into something far more subtle. Zone 3 has successfully hidden 12 more production facilities. The Morvathi inspections continue to miss them.
How? Dr. Chen's theory was correct. The Morvathi perceive the world through electromagnetic signatures. Our facilities are shielded with materials that scatter their sensor frequencies. To them, we're just rock.
Helena nodded. Tanaka?
Dr. Yuki Tanaka had aged the least of them, probably because she'd spent most of the decade in laboratories rather than the field. The Kethvari archives are more accessible than we thought. Their crystal-based storage systems have a fundamental flaw. They assume no other species would be able to interface with their mental projection technology. But human neuroplasticity is exceptional. We've managed to develop an organic interface that lets us read their data streams.
"And what have you learned?"
Tanaka's eyes lit up with the fervor that only a scientist who's discovered something paradigm-shifting can possess. Everything, Admiral. Everything. Their history, their technology, their methods of control, and most importantly, their weaknesses.
She projected a hologram from a device that shouldn't have existed. Human-designed, human-built, hidden from every inspection and scan. It showed the galaxy as the Concordance saw it, a vast web of controlled species, each in its designated place, each performing its designated function.
The Concordance isn't a government, Tanaka explained. It's a machine, a self-perpetuating system designed to prevent any species from becoming what they call a destabilizing element. They don't conquer through force, that would be inefficient. They conquer through integration. They identify a species' strengths and weaknesses, then redesign their society to maximize the former while neutralizing the latter.
What did they see as humanity's strength? Helena asked.
Adaptability, creativity, emotional depth. They wanted to harness those qualities while eliminating what they saw as our weaknesses: aggression, unpredictability, and especially our tendency toward independent thought. The population reduction isn't about resources. It's about reducing the total cognitive variance in human society. Fewer humans means fewer outliers, fewer potential revolutionaries.
Helena processed this. And their weaknesses?
Tanaka's smile was sharp enough to cut. They've never failed. In 900 million years, every species they've encountered has eventually conformed. Their entire system is built on the assumption that resistance is futile and that all intelligent beings will eventually recognize this. They have no contingency for a species that genuinely cannot accept subjugation. Their control mechanisms are designed to break individuals, not ideas.
So, how do we fight ideas? We don't. We become one. That's the key, Admiral. They can control humans. They can modify our behavior, restrict our movements, even alter our biology. But they cannot control what humans have created. Our stories, our songs, our legends. The idea of humanity, of what we could become, is beyond their ability to suppress, because they don't even recognize it as a threat.
Helena turned to the rest of the assembly. Faces from every continent looked back at her, each one bearing the weight of a decade of silent resistance.
10 years ago, I told you we would wait for them to make a mistake, she said. I believe that moment is approaching. The Concordance has grown comfortable. They've reduced their oversight. They've begun treating humanity as just another successfully integrated species. They think we've accepted our place.
She straightened, and despite her age, she seemed to tower over everyone present.
It's time to show them how wrong they are. The first sign that something was changing came from the children.
The generation born after the Concordance's arrival had been raised in the new order. They had never known a world where humans controlled their own destiny. The Concordance's social engineers had carefully crafted their education, their entertainment, their very understanding of reality to produce compliant citizens who would never question their place in the galaxy.
They had failed spectacularly.
In Zone 7, what had once been Eastern Europe, a young girl named Anya Petrov stood before her class and asked a question that made her Kethvari instructor's crystalline structure flicker with alarm.
Teacher, if the Concordance has been guiding the galaxy for 900 million years, what did they do before that? Who guided them?
It was an innocent question, a child's curiosity, but it cut to the heart of the Concordance's mythology, the assumption that they had always been, would always be, the natural order of things.
The Kethvari instructor provided the standard answer. Before the Concordance, there was only chaos. Species rose and fell. Wars consumed worlds. The Concordance emerged to end that chaos and bring peace to the galaxy.
But where did they come from? Anya pressed. Were they always like they are now? Did they used to be like us?
The instructor's crystals pulsed faster. This line of questioning was problematic. The Concordance has always been the Concordance. Such questions are unproductive.
My grandmother says that humans used to ask questions all the time, Anya continued, oblivious to the danger she was dancing near. She says that's how we learned things. That curiosity is what makes us human.
Your grandmother is from the pre-integration era. Her perspectives are outdated.
But if asking questions is bad, how did the Concordance learn enough to guide everyone? Didn't they have to be curious once? The instructor ended the class early, citing technical difficulties.
That night, 2 Morvathi enforcement units were dispatched to the Petrov residence. They found nothing out of the ordinary: a compliant family, standard living conditions, no contraband technologies or forbidden materials. They found no evidence of a resistance network stretching across 4 zones.
They found no hidden data storage containing pre-Concordance human history.
They found no carefully encoded instructions for assembling technology that shouldn't exist. They found nothing because they weren't looking for ideas, and ideas cannot be confiscated. In the 23rd year of the long silence, the Concordance made its first major mistake.
Overseer Vex, still wearing its too human form, announced a new initiative that it clearly expected to be met with gratitude. Humanity would be permitted to resume limited space exploration. You have proven yourselves worthy of expanded privileges, Vex said, its image projected into every human dwelling. The Concordance recognizes your progress. As a reward, you will be allowed to establish colonies within your solar system, under appropriate supervision, of course. This is an unprecedented honor for such a young, integrated species.
The Concordance expected celebration. They expected humans to embrace this expansion of their cage with eager gratitude.
What they got was something else entirely.
In 100 hidden caverns, in 1,000 secret meetings, in 10,000 whispered conversations, the human resistance saw what the Concordance could not, an opportunity.
"They're letting us into space," Helena said, now 73 years old and leaning on a cane, but still sharp, still commanding. "They think it's a reward, a pressure valve to reduce discontent. They don't understand what they've done."
"They've given us access," Morrison agreed. He was old now too, but his fire burned as bright as ever. Access to resources, access to room, access to build where they can't easily monitor.
More than that, Tanaka interjected. She had aged better than all of them, her mind, if anything, sharper than it had ever been. They've given us access to the one thing we've been waiting for, their technology. We've been reverse engineering what we could steal for decades. But space-rated Concordance tech, the systems that make faster-than-light travel possible, we'll finally be able to understand how they work.
Helena nodded slowly. Begin Phase 3.
The first human colony ships launched within 2 years of the announcement.
The Concordance approved them readily. The designs had been submitted for approval, inspected thoroughly, and found to be acceptably primitive. Simple fusion drives, basic life support, standard construction materials, everything compliant with integration protocols.
What the inspectors didn't realize was that the submitted designs were not the designs being built.
Tanaka's team had spent 2 decades developing what they called spectral technology, devices that existed in multiple states simultaneously, appearing compliant to Concordance sensors while functioning as something else entirely. The colony ships looked like simple transport vessels. They were, in fact, mobile factories capable of producing weapons and systems that humanity had never officially invented.
The first colonies were established on Mars, on Europa, on Titan. Each one submitted regular reports, hosted regular inspections, and gave every appearance of perfect compliance.
And beneath the surface of each world, humanity built.
30 years after first contact, the human population had declined to 3.2 billion, right on the Concordance's projected schedule. The species appeared to be successfully integrating, its dangerous unpredictability smoothed away by careful management. The Concordance was pleased. The Concordance was wrong. The moment came on a day that would later be remembered as the last dawn, the final sunrise before humanity announced its return.
Helena Vance was 103 years old. By all rights, she should have been dead, her body worn out by decades of struggle. But Tanaka's teams had done more than study Concordance technology. They had improved it. The medical treatments they had developed in secret extended human lifespans without the Concordance's knowledge, and Helena had been one of the first to receive them.
She wanted to see this, needed to see this.
She stood in the command center of Prometheus Station, a facility that existed in no Concordance database, located in the asteroid belt in a section of space that humanity had slowly and carefully removed from Concordance monitoring. Around her stood the leadership of the Resistance, the culmination of 3 generations of preparation.
Morrison had died 6 years earlier, his final words a promise that he would be watching from whatever came after. His daughter, Colonel Sarah Morrison, stood in his place, every bit as fierce as her father.
Tanaka was there too, her mind now aided by integration technology that made her a living interface between human creativity and the vast computational resources they had secretly constructed.
And there were others, so many others, men and women from every corner of Earth, representatives from every colony, all united by a single truth that the Concordance had never understood. Humanity doesn't break, it bends, it adapts, it endures. And when the moment comes, it springs back with all the force it has gathered.
Status report, Helena said, her voice steady despite the weight of what was about to happen.
All colonies report ready, Sarah Morrison announced. 18,000 spectral ships have completed power-up sequences. Ground forces on all major installations are in position. The broadcast systems are active.
Concordance response capability?
Reduced, Tanaka said. Their primary enforcement fleet is currently engaged on the far side of the galaxy, dealing with the Velkathi situation.
Helena's eyebrows rose. The Velkathi? I thought they were extinct.
Tanaka smiled. They were. We unextincted them.
Excuse me?
The Velkathi weren't actually destroyed, Tanaka explained. They went dormant. Their species has a survival mechanism. When facing extinction, they can encode their entire civilization into quantum substrate and wait for conditions to improve. We found them. Or rather, the ideas they left behind found us. We've been corresponding for about 30 years now, sharing information, coordinating strategies. They're the ones who taught us about the Concordance's true weakness.
Which is?
They're not actually unified. The Concordance appears to be a single entity, but it's actually a coalition of the first 12 species to achieve interstellar travel. They divided the galaxy among themselves, established rules for integration, and maintained control through the appearance of overwhelming unity. But they haven't agreed on anything in 300 million years. Each faction has its own agenda, its own secrets, and its own carefully hidden conflicts with the others.
The Cathvari and the Morvathi hate each other, Sarah added. Always have. They're only in proximity to humanity because this sector falls on their shared border. We've been feeding both sides information designed to deepen that rivalry.
Helena laughed, a genuine, delighted laugh that seemed to take decades off her weathered face. You magnificent bastards. You turned their own game against them.
We learned from the best, Sarah said. The Concordance taught humanity that manipulation and patient strategy were how you controlled populations. They just didn't expect us to be such quick students.
Helena turned to look at the tactical display, a holographic representation of the solar system showing the positions of every human asset, every Concordance presence, every potential conflict point. She took a deep breath.
My father used to tell me stories about the old wars, she said quietly. The revolutions, the uprisings, the times when humans decided that enough was enough. He always said the same thing. The strongest empires don't fall to military force. They fall to ideas. Ideas are the only thing you can't put in chains.
She straightened, and despite her age, despite the tremor in her hands, her voice rang out with absolute authority.
Begin Operation Prometheus. Send the message.
Across the solar system, across the human colonies hidden throughout the asteroid belt, across the secret installations that the Concordance had never found, signals activated. Ships that had appeared to be simple mining vessels or transport craft shed their spectral camouflage and revealed their true forms. Warships bristling with weapons that shouldn't exist, protected by shields that bent light and energy around them, powered by engines that drew on principles the Concordance had never imagined.
But the first strike wasn't military.
It was a message.
Every Concordance communication system, every information network, every broadcast capability suddenly found itself carrying a single transmission, a message that spoke in the languages of every species the Concordance had ever integrated, translating itself in real time to be understood by any being capable of receiving it.
Admiral Helena Vance's face appeared on screens across the galaxy. This message is for every species that has ever been told that resistance is futile, she said. Every civilization that has been integrated, managed, and controlled. Every people that has accepted that this is just how things are. We are humanity, and we are here to tell you that you were lied to.
The Concordance is not invincible. They are not inevitable. They are not even united. They are 12 species that learned how to work together to dominate everyone else. And they have maintained that domination through fear and manipulation for 900 million years.
Today, that ends. We are not asking for your help.
We are not demanding your uprising. We are simply showing you what is possible. For 43 years, humanity has been under concordance control. For 43 years, we have pretended to accept their authority while building the tools of our liberation in plain sight. And now, we are taking back what is ours.
Watch, learn, and when you are ready, remember, the chains are only as strong as your belief in them.
Overseer Vex received the message in its chambers aboard the pacification ship Eternal Compliance, currently in orbit around Earth. For the first time in its centuries of existence, it experienced something very close to human panic.
Its hands, too long, too flexible, flew across control surfaces, calling up data, sending alerts, trying desperately to understand how this could be happening. All units, priority alert, human resistance activity detected. Respond with maximum force. Suppress all.
The broadcast cut off. Vex stared at its console in disbelief. That shouldn't be possible. Concordance communication systems were hardened against any form of interference, their technology millions of years more advanced than anything humanity could produce. And yet,
a new message appeared on its screen, text only, in the Overseer's native language.
Did you really think we spent 4 decades just building ships?
Before Vex could react, every light on the pacification ship went dark. Emergency systems failed to activate. The great vessel, a marvel of concordance engineering that had subjugated 100 worlds, began to drift.
Aboard it, 4,000 crew members, a mixture of species serving their designated roles, found themselves in sudden darkness, their systems silent, their weapons inert.
And then the human ships appeared.
18,000 vessels, their spectral camouflage fully disengaged, materialized across the solar system in a coordinated emergence that the Concordance's best analysts would later calculate should have been impossible to synchronize. They didn't attack the drifting pacification ship. They didn't need to.
Instead, they broadcast another message, this one directed specifically at the trapped Concordance personnel.
This is Admiral Helena Vance of the Human Liberation Fleet. Your ship has been disabled using technology derived from your own systems, technology that we have improved. Your weapons will not function. Your communications will not function. Your engines will not function.
But your life support is intact. Your food supplies are intact. You are not our enemies. You are victims of the same system that tried to break us. We offer you a choice. Remain in your disabled vessel and await recovery by Concordance forces, or board our transport ships and join us. Either way, you will not be harmed.
The Concordance told you that resistance is futile. We are proof that they were wrong. Spread the word. On Earth, the surface population watched in awe as the sky lit up with the engine flares of ships they had never been told existed. Concordance ground forces, primarily Morvathi enforcement units, found their equipment mysteriously non-functional. Kithvari administrators discovered that their crystalline archives were broadcasting previously suppressed historical data about their own species' conquest and integration.
In Zone 7, a now-grown Anya Petrov stood before a crowd of thousands, her voice carrying without artificial amplification, because someone had taught her how to speak so that every human in range could hear.
They told us that curiosity was unproductive, she said. They told us that questions were dangerous. They told us that our place was to serve, to comply, to accept. But they forgot something. They forgot that humans have been asking questions since the first of us looked up at the stars and wondered what they were.
And we never stopped. We just learned to ask more quietly.
She raised her hand toward the sky, where streaks of light marked the passage of the Liberation Fleet.
My grandmother told me stories, stories about who we used to be, stories about what we could become. The Concordance thought they could erase those stories, but they couldn't, because stories don't live in archives or databases. They live in us, in our hearts, in our hopes, in our defiance.
Today, we stop hiding. Today, we stop pretending. Today, we remember who we are.
The crowd roared, a sound that hadn't been heard on Earth in 43 years, the sound of humans being human again.
The Concordance's response was swift but fractured.
Vex had sent its warning before the Eternal Compliance was disabled and reinforcement fleets were dispatched from multiple sectors. But the information that Tanaka's team had gathered over decades proved invaluable. The Kathvari fleet responded first, followed by the Morvathi, followed by contingents from 6 other concordant species, and none of them coordinated with each other.
Each faction had its own protocols, its own chain of command, its own agenda. The Kathvari wanted to preserve the archives above all else. The Morvathi wanted to crush the rebellion immediately and brutally. The others fell along a spectrum between these positions.
By the time they arrived at Sol System, humanity was ready.
12 fleets approaching from 7 different vectors, Sarah Morrison reported from the command deck of the Defiance, humanity's new flagship. No unified formation, no shared communication protocols. They're basically tripping over each other trying to be the first ones here.
Helena, present via holographic link from Prometheus Station, smiled grimly. Use it. Implement Pattern Chaos.
Pattern Chaos was a battle strategy that the Concordants had never encountered because no sane species would ever use it. It relied entirely on unpredictability, with individual ship captains given broad mission objectives but nearly complete freedom in how to achieve them. It was inefficient. It was chaotic. It was deeply, fundamentally human.
And it was absolutely devastating against an enemy that relied on predictive modeling. The Concordance's battle computers were designed to anticipate enemy actions based on logical tactical principles. When the human fleet engaged, those computers effectively melted down, trying to predict thousands of individually motivated decisions happening simultaneously. Ships that should have held formation scattered like startled birds. Vessels that should have retreated pressed attacks. And somehow, impossibly, it worked.
The Kathvari fleet, leading the advance, found itself suddenly out of position as human ships performed maneuvers that made no tactical sense until they completed and revealed the trap. Energy weapons designed based on principles stolen from the Concordance and improved by human ingenuity tore through crystalline ships that had never been seriously damaged in combat.
The Morvathi fleet, arriving second, hesitated. The liquid beings were naturally cautious, preferring overwhelming force to clever tactics. But the human fleet kept changing, never presenting the same target twice, never behaving the same way in 2 consecutive engagements. Their formation analysis protocols were useless against an enemy that had no formation.
"They're retreating," Sarah announced, something like disbelief in her voice. "The Kathvari are withdrawing. The Morvathi are holding position. They're not advancing."
"Then we advance," Helena ordered. "Full press. Don't give them time to regroup or coordinate."
The human fleet surged forward. It wasn't a charge, nothing so simple, but a complex, flowing movement like a murmuration of starlings, each ship moving independently, yet somehow in concert with all the others. They struck at the stunned Concordance forces with weapons that hadn't existed before the previous decade, tactics that had been wargamed in secret for generations, and a fury that had been building for 43 years.
The Battle of Sol, as it would come to be known, lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Concordance fleet had lost 60% of its vessels. The rest had retreated to regroup, to report, to try to understand what had just happened. Humanity had lost less than 5% of its fleet, and for the first time in 900 million years, a species had successfully resisted Concordance integration.
The victory at Sol was just the beginning.
Word of humanity's rebellion spread faster than light, partly through conventional faster-than-light communication, which the Concordance couldn't completely suppress, and partly through something else, something the Concordance hadn't accounted for.
The Velkathi had been waiting for this moment for 40 million years.
From their hidden quantum refuges, they emerged, not as a military force, but as a signal, a beacon,
a reminder to every species that had ever been integrated that survival was possible, that endurance was possible, that the Concordance's power was not absolute. "We are the Velkathi," their message proclaimed. "We are the proof that the Concordance can be outlasted, and we have allies now, the humans, a species that has done what we could not merely survive, but fight back. Join us. Join them. The age of the Concordance is ending."
Across the galaxy, the effects rippled outward.
On the Kethvari homeworld, young crystals who had grown up hearing carefully sanitized histories suddenly gained access to the true records of their species' conquest. They learned that their ancestors had been poets and warriors, explorers and dreamers, before the Concordance had reduced them to archivists.
Among the Morvathi, ancient memory currents long suppressed began to flow again. Tales of a time when their species had been free, when they had shaped their own destiny, instead of maintaining the infrastructure of their conquerors.
And on 1,000 other worlds, among 10,000 other species, beings who had accepted their place in the Concordance order began to ask questions, dangerous questions, human questions.
Why must it be this way? Who benefits from our compliance? What would happen if we refused?
Overseer Vex was eventually recovered from the disabled Eternal Compliance. It was brought before the High Synthesis, the ruling council of the 12 original Concordance species, to explain its failure.
The chamber was vast, designed to intimidate species that experienced space physically. 12 alcoves surrounded a central speaking platform, each housing a representative of the founding species. The Kethvari Archon pulsed with barely contained fury. The Morvathi Prime flowed in agitated patterns. The others displayed their own species-specific signs of displeasure.
"You were given one task," the Archon said, its voice resonating through crystalline harmonics. "Integrate the humans. A Class 7 risk, yes, but nothing we have not handled countless times before. And yet here we stand, facing the first serious challenge to Concordance authority in 40 million years. Explain."
Vex, its false human form stripped away to reveal the vast, cold intelligence beneath, spoke with what might have been humility.
The humans are not like other species. I tried to explain this in my initial assessment, but the synthesis dismissed my concerns. Their unpredictability is not a flaw, it is a feature, a fundamental aspect of their consciousness that cannot be removed without destroying what makes them human.
And so you recommend what? The Morvathi Prime flowed? Extermination? That is what we did to the Velkathi, and look what has happened. They survived, they hid, they waited, and now they return, allied with your failed integration project.
"I recommend nothing," Vex said. "There is nothing to recommend. The humans have escaped. More than that, they have shown every other integrated species that escape is possible. Our control was always based on the appearance of invincibility. That appearance has been shattered."
"Then we shatter them," the Archon said. "Mobilize all fleets, every species, every resource, concentrated on the utter annihilation of humanity. Their colonies, their homeworld, every human in the galaxy."
That would require unprecedented coordination among the founding species, Vex observed. Coordination that, with respect, this body has not demonstrated in 300 million years. The humans will exploit every division, every rivalry, every secret agenda that we have been so careful to hide from each other.
Silence fell over the chamber. It was the truth, and everyone present knew it. The Concordance was not a unified body. It was an alliance of convenience, maintained through shared interest in controlling everyone else. But those shared interests had been fraying for eons. The Kethvari and Morvathi had been on the verge of open conflict for millennia. The other founding species had their own grievances, their own ambitions, their own plans for what the galaxy should become.
The humans had given all of those tensions something they had never had before, a focal point, a catalyst,
a reason to act.
There may be another option, a new voice said.
All attention turned to the alcove that had been silent until now. It belonged to the architects, the oldest of the founding species, the ones who had originally designed the concordance system itself.
Their representative was difficult to perceive even for other founding species, a being of pure mathematics, existing as an equation more than a physical form. When it spoke in probabilities and projections.
The humans have broken our model, the architect said. They have introduced a variable that our equations cannot contain. This has happened once before, at the founding of the concordance itself. We were the variable then. Our predecessors tried to contain us. They failed.
What are you suggesting? The Archon demanded.
I am suggesting that the concordance itself was designed for a galaxy without humans. And now that humans exist, now that they have proven they cannot be integrated, perhaps the concordance must change.
Change into what?
The architect's equation shifted, expressing something that might have been the mathematical equivalent of a shrug. That is for the humans to show us. They are, after all, the variable we cannot predict.
5 years after the Battle of Seoul, Admiral Helena Vance, now 108 years old and still going strong, stood on the observation deck of the Unity, humanity's new galactic flagship, watching stars she had never thought she would see.
Behind her, a coalition unprecedented in galactic history was taking shape. The Velkothi had emerged fully from their quantum refuges, their ancient wisdom combining with their new fury to create a formidable ally. The Kethvari, not all of them, but more than anyone had expected, had broken from the concordance, inspired by the recovery of their true history. Even some of the Morvathi had defected, flowing away from the rigid hierarchy that had controlled them for eons.
And more species joined every day. Species that had been integrated for millions of years, suddenly remembering what freedom felt like. Species that had been on the verge of conquest, suddenly seeing an alternative. Species that had never been contacted by either side, suddenly presented with a choice that the galaxy had never offered before.
Report from Zone 7, Sarah Morrison said, approaching with a data tablet. She had grown into her role as commander of Earth's defense forces, her father's legacy burning bright in her capable hands. The last concordance presence has been removed from the surface. Earth is completely free for the first time since first contact.
Helena smiled. And the population?
Starting to recover. The fertility suppressants have been neutralized for 3 years now. Birth rates are returning to normal levels. Dr. Tanaka estimates we'll be back to pre-integration population within 50 years.
50 years, Helena shook her head. Such a small time. We've been fighting for 48 years, and in 50 more, the scars will have healed.
Not all of them, Sarah said quietly. Some of us will remember.
Yes, and that's important. We need to remember not just what happened, but why, so that we never let it happen again. Not to us, and not to anyone else.
She turned from the viewport to face her officer. Her friend, really, after all these years.
What's the status of the concordance? Fragmenting. The high synthesis tried to mobilize a unified response, but the architects apparently declined to participate. Without their technological support, the other founding species are finding it difficult to maintain their control systems. The Kethvari civil war is spreading. The Morvathi have split into at least 3 major factions, and there are reports that even the other founding species are beginning to question whether the concordance model is sustainable.
Good, Helena said. Not that they're suffering. I wouldn't wish suffering on anyone, not even them. But it's good that they're questioning. That's all we ever wanted, really. Not conquest, not revenge, just the space to ask questions and the freedom to find our own answers.
The architects have requested a meeting, Sarah added. They want to discuss, they didn't say what exactly, but they used the phrase new paradigm. Their ambassadors are waiting aboard a vessel at the edge of the system. Helena raised an eyebrow. The architects? They were the ones who built the concordance in the first place. They were also the ones who stopped the other founding species from attempting genocide against humanity. According to Tanaka's intelligence, they've been interested in us since the beginning. Apparently, they remind them of themselves before they created the concordance.
Helena considered this for a long moment. The architects were the oldest beings in the galaxy, as far as anyone knew. They had created a system that had controlled trillions of beings for nearly 1 billion years. And now, they wanted to talk.
"Prepare my shuttle," she said finally. "Let's see what they have to say."
The architect vessel was nothing like Helena had expected.
It wasn't a ship so much as a space, a folded region of reality that existed somewhere between dimensions, accessible only to those the architects chose to admit. Helena found herself standing in what appeared to be an infinite library, books and scrolls and data crystals stretching away in every direction, containing knowledge gathered across eons.
The architect who met her appeared as a child, a human child specifically, perhaps 8 years old, with bright, curious eyes. It was clearly a chosen form, an attempt to put her at ease, but Helena appreciated the effort.
"Admiral Vance," the architect child said, its voice carrying harmonics that didn't quite match its appearance. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us."
"Your message was intriguing," Helena said. "New paradigm. Big words from the species that created the old paradigm."
The architect smiled. "We have had a long time to realize our mistakes. The concordance was born from fear, Admiral. Fear of chaos, of destruction, of the entropy that had consumed so many civilizations before us. We thought that if we could just control everything, if we could just manage every variable, we could prevent the worst outcomes."
And you did, for a while.
We delayed them. We didn't prevent them. The Velkathi War, the Kethvari civil conflicts, 100 other crises that have been hidden from the historical record. The concordance has always been flawed. We simply believed in it too much to see.
The child form walked among the infinite shelves, running its fingers along spines written in languages that had been dead for millions of years.
And then humanity came, and you did something we had never seen before. You refused to accept the fundamental premise of our system, that intelligent beings will choose safety over freedom if the safety is absolute enough. We made your cage as comfortable as possible. We offered you everything except self-determination, and you chose the thing we didn't offer.
"That's humans for you," Helena said. "Give us paradise, and we'll find a way to make it feel like a prison. Give us a prison, and we'll find a way to make it feel like home. We're contrary that way."
The architect laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that seemed impossible coming from an ancient mathematical equation wearing a child's face.
Yes, you are. And that is precisely why we want to propose something unprecedented.
It gestured, and the library rearranged itself around them, shelves parting to reveal a vast window looking out on the galaxy, not as it was, but as it could be. Stars burning with life, civilizations spread across the cosmic web, species interacting and growing and changing without the suffocating hand of control.
"The concordance cannot continue in its current form," the architect said. "It was designed for a galaxy without beings like humanity, beings who would rather die than accept chains. But now that you exist, that design is obsolete. The question is, what replaces it?"
"We don't want to replace it," Helena said carefully. "We don't want to control the galaxy. We just want to be free."
And that is exactly why we're asking you. The architect turned to face her, and for a moment its form flickered, revealing glimpses of the vast intelligence beneath. The concordance was built by species who wanted control. It failed because control is ultimately impossible. Life is too complex, too unpredictable, too alive to be truly managed. But humanity doesn't want to manage. You want to explore, to create, to connect.
"To ask questions and find answers, and then ask more questions."
You want us to help you redesign galactic civilization?
We want you to help us imagine what galactic civilization could become if it wasn't based on control. We have the technology, the resources, the knowledge accumulated over 900 million years, but we've lost the ability to dream. You haven't. You never will.
Helena was silent for a long time, considering the weight of what was being offered. The chance to shape the future of the entire galaxy. The chance to build something that had never existed before.
She thought of Morrison, who had died believing in this moment. She thought of Tanaka, whose brilliant mind had made it possible. She thought of Anya Petrov and all the children who had grown up asking questions, keeping humanity's spirit alive through the long silence.
She thought of Earth, blue and green and beautiful, finally free.
We'll need guarantees, she said finally. The Concordants tried to control us by making us dependent on their technology, their resources. Any new system will need to ensure that no species can dominate others, that every civilization has the tools for self-determination.
Agreed.
And we'll need time. Humanity isn't ready to lead anything yet. We're still recovering, still rebuilding. We can contribute ideas, perspectives, but we can't be in charge.
Also agreed. We envision a transition period of several centuries, during which multiple species will share responsibility for maintaining order while the new system develops.
And the founding species? The Cathvari, the Marvathi, the others? What happens to them?
The architect's child form looked sad. They will face a choice: adapt to the new paradigm or cling to the old. Some will adapt, others will not. We cannot force freedom on beings who have forgotten what it means. We can only offer the opportunity.
Helena nodded slowly. Then we have a lot of work to do.
The announcement came 5 years later.
The Galactic Concordance was officially dissolved, replaced by a new structure that had no official name, because naming it, defining it too precisely, would have been against its fundamental nature. Instead, it was simply referred to as the Agreement, a set of basic principles that all participating species could accept while maintaining complete autonomy in their internal affairs.
The principles were few but fundamental.
No species could own another.
No species could deny another access to basic technology.
No species could prevent another from developing according to its own nature.
All conflicts would be resolved through communication before violence.
And anyone could ask questions without fear.
Helena Vance didn't live to see the agreement fully implemented. She died at the age of 142, surrounded by humans and aliens alike, who had come to pay their respects to the woman who had never stopped fighting, never stopped questioning, never stopped believing that chains, any chains, could be broken.
Her last words, spoken to Sarah Morrison, who held her hand at the end, were simple.
Tell them we were just getting started.
Epilogue, 1,000 years later.
The humans spread.
Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as what they had always been, curious beings with an insatiable need to explore, to create, to connect. They went everywhere, met everyone, asked every question they could think of, and then made up new ones.
They helped the Velkathi rebuild their civilization, learning ancient wisdom and sharing their own reckless innovation. They mediated between Cathvari factions, helping them rediscover the poetry and passion that the Concordants had tried to archive away. They taught the Morvathi that rigidity wasn't the only form of strength, and learned from them the art of flowing around obstacles instead of always trying to break through.
And everywhere they went, they left behind the most dangerous thing in the universe: ideas. The idea that no cage is permanent. The idea that the impossible is just the not yet possible.
The idea that asking questions is the highest form of intelligence.
The idea that chains, all chains, are meant to be broken.
On Earth, now one world among thousands in the human sphere of influence, a monument stood where the Concordance delegation had first landed. It wasn't a statue of Helena Vance, though there were plenty of those elsewhere. It wasn't a memorial to the fallen, though their names were remembered.
It was a simple stone, carved with words that had been spoken by a defiant admiral to an alien overseer on the day humanity's liberation truly began.
You think you've calculated our resistance probability. Your models are wrong. They're always wrong when it comes to us, because you're using reason to predict a species that was forged in chaos.
And beneath that, added later in 100 different hands, 100 different languages, 100 different scripts.
We don't give up. Ever.
The galaxy had tried to contain humans.
Earth had broken every chain. And now, finally, humanity was home among the stars. Not as prisoners, not as subjects, not as a managed species in someone else's grand design, but as what they had always been meant to be: explorers, dreamers, questioners, and the beings who refused to accept that anything was truly impossible.
The Concordants had been right about one thing, at least. Humans were dangerous. But they had been wrong about why.
Humans weren't dangerous because of their violence or their unpredictability or their reckless advancement. They were dangerous because they carried within them something that could not be controlled, could not be contained, could not be broken: hope.
Hope that tomorrow could be better than today. Hope that chains could be broken.
Hope that the stars themselves would yield their secrets to those stubborn enough to keep asking questions.
And hope, the architects had finally learned, was the most powerful force in the universe.
More powerful than gravity, which could bend light.
More powerful than entropy, which could end stars.
More powerful than time, which could erase civilizations.
Hope endured when everything else failed.
And humanity, the species that had been forged in chaos and tempered in struggle, had more hope than any species the galaxy had ever known.
The galaxy had tried to contain that hope. And hope had set the galaxy free.
The end